any time at sea, this is something you hope you never have to do. Although it takes this life raft only a few seconds to inflate, if your yacht was sinking beneath you, it would seem like forever. Most people who have to use one of these rafts for real are rescued within days or even hours. They're not designed for long-term situations. Because of that, the supplies on board are pretty limited. There's just a pint of water per person. That's not a lot if you happen to sink in the tropics. But occasionally you do hear extraordinary stories about survival at sea.
Dougal Robertson, 38 days adrift with his family. Steve Callahan, 76 days alone in a life raft. And Maurice and Marilyn Bailey, 119 days from shipwreck to rescue.
To live for that long, we've worked out that each person would need this much food, but this much water. So how do you make up the difference? Well, that's one of the things we'll find out in this programme as we explore survival at sea. Well, the sea can be as hostile, if not more so, than any other environment. Well, you can have it all, can't you? You can have the heat of the desert, the lack of water of the desert, and you can have the freezing cold of the Arctic, all in the ocean. But you can find food here quite readily. That's one advantage. I think the key thing is preparation. Most of those people who have survived for long periods at sea have a mentality, a preparation mentality, that is a necessary part of seamanship. Because when you're at sea, you're entering the world's largest wilderness. Anyone spending any time at sea needs specific survival skills. If you have to abandon ship, you have to know what to do. Even the crew of a frigate like this one has been through the Royal Navy's basic sea survival course, learning skills that save lives.
During the Second World War, the Royal Navy lost a lot of people in the water. Something like 2/3 of the people that went into the water didn't survive, about 30,000. We learned that we needed to improve our sea survival training.
Stand yourself up and roll in. Roll in, don't step in, always roll in. OK.
One test at the Institute of Naval Medicine showed how poor equipment was costing lives. They found that an unconscious body tends to turn to face the waves, increasing the chances of inhaling water and drowning. Now all Navy life jackets have a simple hood that could have saved thousands of lives. The Royal Navy trains both its own recruits and civilian sailors how to abandon ships safely, so that if they do end up in the water, they'll know what to expect.
Just hold on to your belts. Right onto the edge.
Of course, our ships are very unlikely to sink, but by virtue of the fact that they are warships, there is always the possibility that the worst could happen. And we would be remiss if we did not train our people in dealing with that situation.
One of these will keep you afloat indefinitely. But even if you haven't got a life jacket, you can improvise.
In 1995, Zachary Mayo was a US Marine serving on the aircraft carrier USS America. The ship was sailing through the Indian Ocean, where the nights can be hot and stuffy.
One night, Zachary had come on deck to get a breath of fresh air when a door like this one swung open and knocked him 30 feet into the sea.
When you see a ship pull away from you, it's like you're helpless and you can't do anything about it. It was really lonesome and scary. As the ship kept getting further and further away, I knew that I was going to have to at least hold up until the morning.
So you're in the middle of the Indian Ocean with no way of raising the alarm and, more crucially, no life jacket. What on earth do you do?
I had to kick my boots off. Then I had to take my pants off. And what I do is I have to go underwater like this. I had to tie the legs in 2 knots. Basically just taking them around and tying a regular knot into them. And I'd fill the legs up to air like this. And I'd just float on them.
Zachary Mayo had to spend 2 nights like this, never knowing whether he'd be found. It was 30 hours before he was even reported missing.
I was scared. I was really scared. I basically prayed for God to watch over me and help me get through this.
The America launched a search, but to no avail. Luckily, Zachary was found just in time by the crew of a Pakistani fishing boat who pulled him to safety.
I don't think I could survive much longer due to the fact that I was sunburned, dehydrated, my muscles weren't able to move anymore, and I was pretty much done for.
Zachary Mayo's stamina was amazing, but he was lucky to fall overboard in the Indian Ocean, where the sea temperature is in the high 20s. If you fall into colder water like this, then the muscles in your hands and arms seize up, making crucial survival tasks impossible.
We set up a demonstration to show just how quickly that can happen.
To show that, we're going to ask John here to open a flare in air. Then we're going to pop him into the water for about 30 minutes. And after that 30-minute period, we'll ask him to do exactly the same thing again. I hasten to add it's a dummy flare, so we won't have to take cover.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Well done. That's 3 seconds. Very good. We're at a relatively warm water temperature, 14 degrees today. Early summer water temperature around the British Isles. The kind of temperatures which people are swimming around in.
Okay, John, so how are you feeling?
Okay, cold.
You're shivering like constantly now, are you?
Yeah.
So when you're ready?
After 30 minutes, we repeated the flare test. Remember, John had taken just 3 seconds to fire it the first time.
Go.
He struggled to do the same thing after just 30 minutes in reasonably warm water. Now, once you reduce that temperature to 5 degrees, which is the average winter temperature, then that time extends.
That's it? Well done.
That was 20 seconds. We've measured people taking 2.5 minutes to try and do this type of activity in the colder water temperatures. And in some cases, of course, they'd fail altogether. People should be aware of these responses and the fact that very quickly you see a significant deterioration in your ability to do simple actions like open a flare, climb aboard a life raft, tie a knot in a rope. And as a consequence of that, with that knowledge, you make sure you get those activities done very quickly before you lose the capability to do them.
That's lovely.
Surviving for minutes or even hours is one thing, but I'm fascinated by people who've managed to go beyond that. People like Steve Callahan, who survived for 2.5 months after being shipwrecked.
Steve had been sailing since the age of 12, intent on a life of adventure. In 1982, he stocked his boat here in the Canaries before enjoying a last beer and setting out across the Atlantic. Steve had sailed from America to England to compete in a race back across the Atlantic, but he'd been forced out of that by bad weather and had to make repairs in Spain. The Canaries were his last landfall before setting out to complete his journey. There you go, Jerry.
Welcome aboard.
Good to see you.
I had probably done about 40,000 miles or so of sailing. I'd been back and forth to Bermuda, I don't know, at least a half dozen times or so, and been across the Atlantic once and so on. So I was what I consider moderately experienced as a sailor.
Steve told his family and friends that his trip should take about a month, but that if conditions were against him, it could take much longer. Within a week, he was wishing he could have been more precise.
The initial moments were a lot of things happening at once, a tremendous explosion, and water came thundering in, like a river flowing into the boat. I'm pretty sure it was something that T-boned the boat. My presumption is it was a whale, but I'll never know for sure. The water was coming in very, very fast, and there was no question in my mind I had to get out of the boat. I knew that I really needed my ditch kit, so I took the chance of diving down and feeling around getting that.
On board his raft, Steve had made some really good preparations. He had paddles with which he could obviously move it and ward off sharks. He had flares. He had a signal mirror, 6 pints of tinned water, some fishing kit, navigation equipment. That was going to prove vitally important. And he had a couple of these solar stills with which he could turn salt water into fresh drinking water. In his ditch kit, Steve had a few other useful emergency items. He kept a Tupperware box in which he had 21 more emergency flares. He had some emergency food. He had a knife, some pencils, 2 more pints of water, and most crucially of all, he had this, a spear gun.
Although he was better prepared than many who found themselves in similar situations, Steve was initially pessimistic about his chances.
I was just about smack dab in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and there was certainly a big part of me that said, forget it, you're not even going to get out of here. I realized that in the area I was in, I would be pushed by the currents and the trade winds towards the West Indies. Unfortunately, I figured it would take me about 2.5, 3 months in order to reach that land, and I didn't really think that I could live that long.
But this book proved to be crucial. It's a manual to sea survival that contains just about everything you need to know to live from the sea. It was compiled by Dougal Robertson, who spent 38 days adrift with his family in 1972. Fortunately, Steve had included one of these in his ditch kit.
It provided me both with concrete information and also a reminder of his own tale. Knowing that people somehow were able to create a life for themselves, even in the middle of this sort of what I often call the watery desert of the world, the ocean, gave me a great inspiration. The basic theory is that you can live about 10 days without water and you can live a month without food. So water is the definite priority. I had about 8 pints of water in my ditch kit. So I figured, well, maybe I've got 18 days to live, which wasn't even enough time to get me to the shipping lanes, the nearest shipping lanes. I looked out in the ocean and it was beautiful. It was like a swimming pool 3 miles deep, just gorgeous water. But it's the old ancient mariner thing of water everywhere and not a drop to drink.
The reason you can't drink seawater is that if you do, the amount of salt in your body increases, which means you have to take water from your vital organs to dilute it.